I'm Manji Gerber, and welcome to another episode of Open Mic Uncensored. Today, I'll be speaking with Dr. Amy Chai, who testified last week on the 13th of February about the book banning bill, raised Senate Bill 1271. I hope you enjoy the show, and we'll also be discussing a little bit about the Connecticut politics and the state of play in the GOP. Thank you. So I'm so happy to have you here today. We're going to be talking about, I guess, the bill from last week, the hearing that we all attended on the 13th, which was about the books.
Yes. Yes. Thank
Senator
you so much
Majority
for
Leader.
having me, Manju.
Well, it's such a pleasure for me because you are such an outspoken fighter and a warrior. And I really appreciate everything that you do, how you get yourself involved in trying to raise awareness. So that's so important. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a physician and I actually am a sequencer. I took 10 years out to homeschool middle school and high school for my children. Then I went right back to work. I'm double boarded internal medicine and also in addiction medicine and have a postdoctoral degree in epidemiology and care of the complex patient. So, what I do now is I treat addicted patients, particularly fentanyl addicted patients, I and that actually is what kind of led into my interest in politics.
Wow, that's great. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. We had the hearing on the 13th,
Mhm.
the books, and how it was basically geared towards protecting librarians from
Right,
any sort of harassment by parents, especially. And it would actually punish parents, right? If we were to
correct,
speak loud against a certain book that we were challenging. And
right,
that's what I was trying to tell them at the hearing when I spoke up was the fact that a book ban is not equivalent to a book challenge. Challenge, you're just raising the awareness that such a book exists and that you, as a parent, would not prefer to have your child be exposed to that on a bookshelf, right?
right.
A ban, of course, as we know, is you cannot be able to market the book, publish a book, and nobody would be able to read the book then because it's like alcohol prohibition. So, I really take a huge kick out of people that have these t-shirts or signs that say, "Oh, I read banned books." You know, you
Yeah.
couldn't, right?
You couldn't read a banned book, sorry. The fact that you're reading it means it actually is not banned.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So, my two big takeaways from the hearing, I have to say, just listening to people, was number one, either they were clueless or unaware that these books even existed. And they are indeed in a library, whether it be a public library or a school library. And that the Democrats that were on the committee really just wanted to railroad this thing through. I mean, it did not matter what had to be said, what needed to be shown in that. They had an agenda, and it was my way or the highway.
exactly. And
And I
that's
want
how
to
the
ask you the
Democrats
same.
are when they have a supermajority and they have a political machine in Connecticut. It's they get to shove whatever they want down your throat. And I don't believe for 1 second that they're unaware of what's in the schools. They are aware. There's no question that and they're basically just gaslighting. But the thing that I tried to bring up in the hearing was the fact that the word that they threw around a lot is the word curate. And what they mean by curating is choosing what books are appropriate for the school library. Just like in a museum, you would curate a collection of what might be like nice art for people that people might want to see. You curate it and you choose what art is in the museum and you choose what art is not in the museum. And a lot of that is a matter of, you know, personal personal opinion. So the librarians are given the job to curate the books in the school libraries. And what they're literally doing is choosing which books belong in the library and which books do not belong in the library. And I'm specifically referring, of course, to public schools. Um, but parents, when parents want to decide what's in the library, what's appropriate to be in the library, and what's not appropriate to be in the library, now that's also curation. But as soon as parents try to influence the curation of the collection of books in the school library, they're derided as some sort of Nazi book burning, book banning thugs, which is completely untrue. And I'll bet you any amount of money. I mean, I dare you to go into any of the public school library and see if you can find children's books from, say, for example, PragerU or Focus on the Family or something. There's no way you're going to find those books curated into our public school library, because they'll say, oh, those aren't appropriate because they're conservative or something. So it is curation. It isn't book banning. And we should call it curating, just like they call it curating. Why should they get to call it curating and we don't?
Right, that's true. And I'm just sharing a screenshot with you of what the bill was, the raised Senate bill 12. There is still time for people to write in or email their own representatives, whether it be in the House or the Senate, to let them know, hey, we don't really approve of this bill. And, if you do pass something like this, let's take into account parental rights, add something in support of that.
That I think the other problem is that none of these books are marked or rated. So children who don't want to be exposed will open a book and be exposed unwillingly to pornographic imagery. And to me, that is violence, that is assault, that is a hostile environment for them. Because if you did that to me at my workplace, I could sue you. It is a hostile environment. And a child going to pick up a book that looks colorful and pretty on the outside, they open it, and there's images of people engaging in oral sex acts inside. That child is going to be traumatized, and that is violence against children. That's assault, literally.
Right. Now, I think your testimony was actually on point. And I think that's why they felt so threatened by you, that you are up there for quite a bit of time taking shots, from the other side.
Yes,
I thought you were
indeed.
very effective.
Thank you.
And in fact, I have to say, I try to read a book later that evening because I think I went up around 9:30 that evening, and I wanted to read a passage out of The Bluest Eye from Toni Morrison. Now, I have no problems with Toni Morrison. I have read a lot of her books, Song of Solomon, Beloved, but is it appropriate for certain readers in a school library, certain passages? And that's what I was trying to point out. I was told to not read it out loud because, once again, there could be a young child watching or listening, and it was inappropriate for their age. And that's when me and Ann made that comment. Ann, who is State Representative Ann Daphne from Sterling Danielson District. She made the comment, well, wait a minute, these kids should be sleeping at that point, which was my comment too. They should be in bed because it's 9:30 at night. But even then I was told not to. And I just thought it was fascinating. Now, Amy, I do want to say you made a lot of great points from your personal medical experience of what you found. Can you let the audience know about that?
Yes. As I mentioned, I treat the most severely addicted, fentanyl addicted patients, who many of them live in the streets or are engaged in sex work or have been trafficked, have been in prison. And one of the common things that they tell me is that they were molested or abused as children, and that's both men and women. It's more than half of them. And we know, I mean, everyone knows who has been involved in social work or teaching or medicine at all. We all know that exposure to like pornographic imagery and things like that um, kind of normalizes that in the minds of children in a way that, and I don't want to use the word grooming, but in a way that makes them more receptive to abuse by those who might want to take advantage of and abuse those children. And
Right.
we've known that for years.
Right.
And I have said that addiction is a pediatric disease. I didn't make that up. I learned that in my CME that I have to take to maintain my license. We know that the things that happen to people, the traumas and the abuse, it really contributes and can be causative. It can be that trigger that triggers children to engage in risky behaviors that lead down the road to addiction later on. And someday I would like to retire, but as of right now, I have a feeling that there's going to be more and more and more patients. We're seeing skyrocketing rates of depression and skyrocketing rates of drug abuse and addiction. And, you know, I would like to retire with a good conscience someday, thinking that there's not an overwhelming load of people who need my help. And that's really one of the motivating factors for me to be so interested in this topic.
Yeah, I just found that so fascinating when you were talking about that. Um, by the way, on the screen right now is the Majority Senate Leader, Bob Duff. This
Yeah.
is his bill. I know he worked on it with the chair, Committee on Children, the chair of that, which was CC Mayer. I think they had both, and I think Senator Duff had co-sponsored the bill. Once again, protecting librarians. Don't you think it's a little fascinating, though, that they decided to sort of give harbor in such a way to librarians as if they're under threat or something? As far as I
Yeah.
know, as parents, we've been the one most misaligned, I think,
Yeah.
and like I said in my testimony, we had a Justice Department from the last administration target us and target parents and call domestic terrorists. I don't know.
Yes.
I mean, who needs the protection here? Librarians or us that were targeted by the United States Attorney General at that time.
Right. And as a woman and as a mother, um, the one thing that I know, you as a mother also, and I as a mother, we would die. We would step in front of a train for our children. Um, if
You
you
bet.
are if you're gonna hurt my child, I'm gonna fight back. Um, and I think that's the motivation of parents. Parents know, especially moms, we're there to protect, our children. That's our job. That's our duty. And for us to be demonized by those who decide that they can rule over us and tell us what to do, with our own tax money that we're paying them, and we have no voice over that. Um, that's really a violation of our civil rights. And I think that the maternal child bond is probably one of the most foundational and fundamental human rights that there really is. Um,
It
don't
is.
harm my child. Don't harm my child. That's
Yeah,
it.
right.
Yeah.
And as I was stating in that Supreme Court case from 1925, um, Pierce versus the Society of Sisters, the ruling was basically by the Chief Justices and the rest of the justices that parents have every right to educate their child in how they see fit. That's
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. And that has already been adjudicated by the Supreme Court. And
Exactly.
yeah, and it's also been put in the UN CRC, which is the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which says that children have the right to be raised in the beliefs and values of their family of origin by their parents. And so really they're violating UN civil, of course, the United States didn't sign on to that convention, but it really is very evidently a violation of our fundamental human civil rights.
Yeah, which leads me to the next topic that I thought we can discuss and touch upon. Um, I'm a little disappointed that the leadership in our state, the Connecticut GOP party, has not really been a little bit more forceful and with the side of the parents
Right.
and taken issue with that. What are your thoughts about the state of play of the GOP politics in Connecticut? What is your feeling on it?
Well, with friends like that, who needs enemies, right? I feel like the GOP is running scared. Only 20% of the electorate is registered as GOP. And in the past few years, we've seen a drastic drop off in the number of elected officials that are GOP in this state. There was no support of any of the candidates in Connecticut from the GOP, no financial support, no press, no volunteers, nothing. For everyone who's donated money to the Connecticut GOP, you'll find that virtually all of it went back to the state GOP. I mean, the federal, excuse me, the federal GOP, and none of it was spent on candidates. Here, you can look that up on opensecrets.org. So whatever they're doing, it isn't supporting Republican values or even the citizens' values of the state. It seems almost like, I don't want to say they don't care, but they're certainly not putting in any effort, no visible, no visible effort. And I think, if the number of Republicans drops any further, it's going to become a minor party. Because if it drops below 20%, it's going to be a minor party, and then there will not be ballot lines, and Republicans will be forced to get signatures to get ballot lines, just like a minor party has to do.
Oh my God, that's really scary. Um, do you think it's because they want to moderate their views?
I think they're spineless, completely spineless. There is, there's always that first person who says something, and I'm usually the first person to do it because I have a very thick skin, and so
You sure
when
do.
there's something when something comes out that I think is wrong, I'll say it. And when I say it, I get tons of DMs in my inbox saying, "Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much for saying that. I wish I could say that." And it's like, well, why can't you say that? I just said it.
Mm,
Are you afraid of people saying something mean to you? I'm not.
right, right, right.
So,
Yes.
and so eventually there's something called a preference cascade. And this is a scientific term. It's called a preference cascade. What that means is when one person says that they're the freak that everyone hates, that's my role. And then a couple other people come in and it's like, oh, maybe some people are saying it. And then when a certain number of people start saying it, then the floodgates open and you realize that everyone thinks the same thing, but they were just afraid to say it. They were afraid of being socially stigmatized. And I'm sorry, I will be stigmatized. You can stigmatize me, tar and feather me, do anything you want to me, but I'm going to stand up for the kids and I'm going to stand up for my patients. I don't want to see more children abused. I don't want to see them in my clinic half dead. I just don't.
Um, Going back to the state of play for when it comes to GOP politics here, I mean, I just feel that it would make more of a stand, I think, if the state GOP would come out and tell people, hey, this type of legislation is up. There's a hearing. Get your voices heard. Get a group together. And how effective or how much more of stature would it be for, let's say, the GOP chair to come out in a press conference with the minority House leader and the minority Senate leader and saying, we are going to fight this bill. We're going to fight all of these types of legislation. And this is why we're doing it. We back the people. Do you know what I mean? And really kind of be in the trenches.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. We need new leadership in the state GOP. And if you watch Newsmax this Friday, you might learn something. I don't think I'm allowed to really necessarily say what is going to happen, but
Okay.
but I've formed
Is
a
there
group.
something percolating? You know,
There is
because maybe
something.
you'll come back and let us know.
There is something percolating. If you want to be kept up to date, you may want to join my X community, which is called Connecticut Changemaker. And I'm
Yeah.
going to try to have spaces on there, but there's certain things that need to happen. The bylaws, for example, and I know this is dry, but reading through the bylaws, for example, there is no statement on budget. So there's really no oversight or decision making on who spends the money where. That's basically from the top, and no one else gets to have a voice in it. And there's no commitment there in the bylaws that says that the GOP has to support GOP candidates that are on ballot lines. There's nothing like that. I'm going to be writing up, for one, I'm going to be writing up some bylaws that I think most Republicans would agree should be in the bylaws. Now, as we all know, GOP and Democrats are both private corporations. They're under no obligation to the voters, and they're under no obligations to follow their own bylaws, as we learned from the Supreme Court debate on the Bernie Sanders case, right? So they don't have to do anything. But I think within our state, it's a small state. I think we can get some bylaws in there that put some transparency into the GOP party. And also, we have so many empty ballot lines everywhere. We have many uncontested ballot lines throughout the state. And people need to be recruited to fill those ballot states to stop the supermajority in Hartford. I mean, it doesn't pay very much to be a representative. It's like some very low amount of money that you get for it. And then you have to listen to the to people complaining a lot. So
Right.
it's not a fun job, but somebody has to do it, right?
Right.
And I believe that we have a lot of common ground with people who are independent, with people who are libertarian. And I believe if we have empty ballot lines that aren't being filled by anyone who would caucus with us, that we should put some of those people on the empty ballot lines, as long as they agree to America first, citizens
Right.
first,
Right.
transparency first, no corruption. Those are some of the core values that independents and libertarians also share with the Republican Party. And a lot of people have left the Republican Party because they're just so frustrated. But
Of
these are
course.
people who
Yes.
I think would come back if we actually had a party that actually wasn't like a giant circular firing squad.
Well, yeah, and also fought for the people and for what they
Right.
wanted. I
For what
think
the
that's
people want.
huge.
Yeah,
Right.
because this isn't a club. It's not like a club where you go have cocktails. Well, kind of it is, but it shouldn't be a club where you go have cocktails. It should be a group where you represent. Imagine that we live in a republic, right? A representative republic. What are we supposed to do? Represent the people, right? And granted, there's a lot of very left-leaning people in Connecticut. That's fine. But there's a lot of people who aren't, and they have no voice for decades in this state. No voice for decades. And if we don't work together, we're never going to have a voice, and we're going to become just like California. And that would be just suicidal just because of our own pride. We can't work with people? We're going to like cut other people down because they're you know, not 100% on board with every single thing we think. When we could be caucusing together, we could be working together, we could be like eliminating the big blue machine together. I don't know.
Focusing back on Connecticut, I just think that it's such a shame that there's so many Republicans that feel that they are not being represented. They're not being valued,
Right.
really. And where do you think the role should be in terms of the RTCs in the state? And not just that, but what about the state central?
Okay. I think people don't know how the party works, frankly. People are like, oh, tell the Republicans this or that, or they might like tag the party or whatever. But if you want the party to represent you, you probably need to show up at an RTC meeting and tell them what you think. You may even want to run for central committee. It's very expensive to be on the central committee. You have to pay a lot of money. Not everybody can afford to be on the central committee. And I think, what, a couple $1,000s a year, they want your money. And then you have to attend a lot of events, which can be up to $1,000. So I don't think that's necessarily appropriate. I think that should change. I don't think there should be any financial requirement to be on the central committee, because that's what makes it into a giant club where you go and have cocktails. I think people need to be represented. So I think that financial piece of the central committee needs to be removed. And I think people need to go into the RTCs locally and get involved, because at the heart of it, if we want a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people, well, we're the people. That means we have to get involved. If we don't get involved, we have no one to blame but ourselves.
Well, one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people, and this is all over the state about the RTCs, is that it seems that there's much more moderate and there's less conservatives that are made to feel welcome,
Mhm.
um, in the RTC. So, that's like another problem I think that needs to be addressed, because I hear that all the time
I hear that all the
from
time too.
so many people all over the
Yeah.
state.
Yeah. And I'm going to say something that probably is not going to resonate well with maybe your viewers, but we need a bigger tent. We can't call people rhinos because they're not 100% in line with us. That's not going to work. I mean, you can have somebody that is 100% aligned with all of your values and insist that that's the only person you want to represent the state, and then they're never going to win. And that's why I left the Libertarian Party, because it's like all we could do was sit around and argue about who's libertarian enough, and never, ever, ever win ever again. And that's why I like the Trump presidency so much. He has libertarians, he has Democrats, he has
Right.
independents, he
That's right.
has conservatives. It is a coalition of people that are pragmatic, that want to actually solve problems, get rid of corruption, and put America first. And, say somebody, maybe they have a little bit of a different view on some topic that you maybe agree with or disagree with. You know what? Let's put that aside. Let's put that aside. Let's reach out to people who share common values. I think, for example, a lot of the minority people share a lot of our social conservative values.
Mhm.
And a lot of
That's
the
very true.
yeah, and a lot of the independents share more of our fiscal conservative values. And the libertarians are very much pro liberty, pro free speech, pro Second Amendment, and they want smaller federal government, which is very much in line with many, or if not most, of the conservative values. So I think broadening the tent is vital if we ever intend ever to break through the big blue machine that is funded corruptly. I'm going to say it. The elections are corrupt. The funding is corrupt. And because they're in power, they don't need to listen to us, and they seem to relish shoving things down our throats. And then they smirk at us. And you hear people like Chris Murphy and Bob Duff just trolling their constituents online. And I'm like, if I were an elected official, I would never troll my constituents. I would listen to them no matter what party they were from and say, I get your concern. I get your concern. And I'll think about what you said. I'm not going to like say they're idiots or say they're fascists. That's just not acceptable to me at all.
Right, right. No, I agree with you there, definitely. I know that State Senator Bob Duff had put out some kind of comment about it when he was being blasted by libs of TikTok on X, how these people were crazies, quote unquote, calling
Right.
parents that. And I really was very much turned off by that. I don't live in his district or in his area, but seeing something like that, it's kind of like, please, that's what you're going to call parents? We're taxpayers. There are parents that are voting for you, that work
Yeah,
for your campaign, and you call them crazies. I mean, come on.
that's not okay.
So I just wanted to tell you once again, thank you so much, Amy, for coming on. I hope this is not the last time. I hope you keep coming on. I'd love to have you. We can talk about so many other topics. And of course, about the state of politics in the GOP tent, for Connecticut as a nutmegger.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed our talk.
Oh, good. Thank you. All right, then.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye.